The Senate passes a $1.7 trillion spending bill with help from almost 20 Republicans who swore that they were small government and against spending of all forms and wanted to shrink the size of government. And I mean, we hear the same thing every year, so I don't know why anybody's surprised by this, but yeah, it's a bullcrap lie, and we'll be talking about it, what it means, and where we go with that as we go forward, and some of the other things that have been dug out in this massive monster behemoth bill. So we'll go over all of that and talk about it, and pretty much how much we're all screwed at this point. It's not going to be good news, and I don't know why anybody thought it was going to be. In other news, as we were on last night, Zelensky addresses Congress. So, we'll be talking a bit about his speech, some of the highlights, some of the reviews, and some of the fawning from members of the left who think that we should be giving him another $45 billion, maybe even $1.7 trillion of his own dollars to go and try to prop up his country or launder it or buy what. I don't know what they're doing with this, and I don't think he does either. What else do we have here? Sam Bankman-Fried has been released on a $250 million bond into the custody of his parents, and, well, there's probably going to be some low security there, and, we'll see if he makes it to trial, so we'll go over some of that, and where we go with that, and what happens there. And Ron DeSantis promotes a bill to stop zombie unions from deducting from teachers' pay. It is going to be all this and more. Merry Christmas, everybody. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. I think tomorrow when I do this, I'm going to wear the headphones that don't have the bar over the top, because I don't get a good sound off of this. I can hear what's going on. I can hear that there's music in the background, but it's really quiet because my headphones aren't pressed up against my ears. And, well, I knew that was going to be an issue with trying to throw the hat on, but it's festive. It's Christmas season. You can almost barely see that it's a Santa hat. I know that Santa hat is kind of sitting on a crooked a little bit too. It's maybe a size too small, but it's been out every year for Christmas, so it's got to come out this year. I know I didn't get to partake in the Halloween holiday this past year because, well, I had an interview that day, and I just had so much else going on. It wasn't the interview for the place that I'm at now, but there was an interview that day. So I had to bypass that, my Halloween costume. I know we usually do something more about thankfulness on Thanksgiving. I couldn't get to that either because I was about to move. So I know I've had a million excuses. So I went through and I dug out the Santa hat, threw it on, crooked, and got started here because we actually do have a lot of news to get to today. This one was a fairly busy day today, and I think that the four that we left over with yesterday, I think those are going to wind up left over again here yet today, just because we had so much going on with the omnibus, with Zelensky, with everything else, and all the stuff we couldn't get to yesterday because Zelensky was lying to our Congress while we were on air. So we'll get to as much of it as we can over here on Contemporary today. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, and the No Gimmicks Podcast. Go check out all that great programming as we strive together to try to bring you a more robust news and culture experience. as we come together to try to bring you news and culture from the common man for the common man. That's right. It's not a time for you to get news and culture from people who will never have to look down and say, hey, I've got to figure out if I can buy a new house, if I can sell the house, if I can go get into my first house, if I've got to switch jobs, if I've got to stay in my job. Rather than try to get your news, culture, commentary from people like that, get your news, commentary, and culture from people who are just like you. People who've had to make some of these hard decisions and try to figure out whether they stay in their area, whether they move away, whether they get that new job, whether they stay in the job that they're at. Go find all these people out here who can help bring you news and culture from the common man for the common man. And with that, we will take some time and look into the news of the day, especially the 1.7 trillion reasons why the Republican Party is not your friend, never has been, and why they just sold you down the river again. So go check out all of that great programming. Let's look into our news of the day because we've got a lot of it to go through. And we will start today by getting the live chat up on the screen and looking in at the Dow, which went back into its sell-off mode yesterday after a wonderful couple days of everything looking like it's going to be wonderful and great again. The Dow briefly dipped in the intraday back below the 33,000 mark, but did bring itself back up just slightly above to 33,027.49 points. That is down, even with the recovery, 348.99 points. So definitely not the rosy outlook that we saw yesterday. Definitely not the good things that we have for that. And don't worry, we will be looking at what Grant is saying here too. So that's where we're at right now. The Dow lost 1%. After, again, looking like it's good. And let's go back out to the year to date and see what it is that we're going to be looking at the end. Now, we're not down to the low points that we saw back in the changeover from summer into fall, when we saw 228. We saw our low point at 28,660 was the low point that we got out of everything here. But we did get a jump back out of here. But the Dow is still down on the year, almost 10%. 35, 57, 57, and we are getting close to the point. There's not going to be some time for that to recover unless there's some big things that happen, but I don't see any of that coming here, but that's what we see coming from that. That's where we go from there. Let's have a look at your Bitcoin, which pretty much stayed flat throughout the day. It's actually up about 710 on the day today after taking a significant dip, bringing itself back down, flirting with the 16.6 line, and then shooting itself back up, bringing itself back out to 16,810 US dollars and 40 US cents. That is up $7.10, or about 0.4%. But yeah, pretty much staying flat right now. We'll continue to watch this and see what happens with this. Bitcoin on the year to date has not fared as well as the Dow, losing almost $30,000 in value throughout the year. So that's what we see coming off of that. I still consider it to be on sale, so I would like to possibly get some for Christmas as well. So that's what we see for that. Gas prices, if you're in Madison, Wisconsin, which I am no longer in the Madison area. Luke Wheat, you probably know about where I'm at right now. I see you in the chat over there. But I'm a lot closer to Minnesota now than I was here. The gas prices are staying steady in the Madison area. I know I promised they'd probably be up yesterday. And in the greater La Crosse area, they are up at this point. But the only gas station that's moved, according to this map, is the BP that's leaving Madison across the Beltline on Highway 18, which went from 268 to 270 over the course of the day. So flat in the capital area, but a little bit higher in various other areas here. These prices may not reflect your personal gas prices. This is a moving average that we've been watching since the gas prices hit the bottom in in July of 2020, and watching the directions that they go, looking in at the very same gas stations throughout the entire time. Let's grab one from Investors Business Daily. Dow futures await Fed's favorite inflation report. Tesla rises late on Elon Musk pledge. From Ed Carson. Dow futures were little changed after hours, along with the S&P and the NASDAQ futures. The Federal Reserve's favorite inflation gauge is on tap for Friday morning, while Tesla stock rose late on Elon Musk comments. The stock market suffered heavy losses on Thursday, wiping out Wednesday's gains and more amid a negative corporate news and economic data, as well as a bearish comments from billionaire investor David Tepper. The major indices broke key levels, with many leading stocks getting back. Stocks did pare losses, but the closing declines were still significant. Nvidia, Lam Research, and other chip stocks were big losers, as memory chip maker Micron missed views, guided low, and announced staff and additional capital spending cuts. The Tesla meltdown continued. In addition to company-specific factors, Tesla stock tumbled on Thursday, with other automakers as CarMax cited vehicle affordability issues for its big quarterly miss. Well, yeah, and a part of the fact is with nobody having inventory, they've got to pay top dollar to get the car. We've gone over the used car problem before. With nobody having inventory, they've got to pay top dollar to get your trade back out of you, which means they have to mark that up X amount in order to go back and make a profit when they sell. And a man without profit is no man at all, especially if you hope to get into the golden treasury at the end of life. Let's see. Tesla stock rallied late after Elon Musk signaled no new share sales through 2023. Other mega caps showed weakness, with Apple skidding towards bear market lows once again, with Amazon already there. Microsoft broke through key support. Investors should largely be in cash, reducing already modest exposure, and largely eschewing new buys. And the problem with that is your cash isn't safe either right now, because the government is currently inflating it further and further. They just added another $1.7 trillion of money printer go burr to your already harsh inflation. Third quarter GDP growth was revised higher than forecast, along with the report's inflation gauge. Initial jobless claims nudged higher, but less than expected. The November index of leading economic indicators fell 1%, bolstering arguments for a recession next year. Tomorrow, the day before Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, if you will. The Commerce Department will release the Personal Consumer Expenditures Price Index for November. The inflation data is part of the monthly income and spending report. The PCE Price Index should rise 0.2 in October, with core prices also up 0.2. The PCE inflation rate should cool to 5.5% from October's 6%. Core PCE inflation is expected to slow to 4.6% from 5%. The PCE inflation rate has been the Fed's favorite price gauge for some time. Recently, Fed Chief Jerome Powell has said he's keeping a close eye on PCE services prices, excluding housing. Personal income should climb 0.3% in November, with consumer spending up 0.2%. Americans have been dipping into savings and ramping up credit charges in recent months. On the futures, Dow futures were steady versus fair value. The S&P were flat, and the Nasdaq futures tilted higher, with Tesla stock offering a modest boost. PCE inflation rate figures will be released 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. November durable goods data will also be released at the time, with November new home sales out at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate to actual trading in the next regular stock market session. So that's what we have from that. Let me look at one more here, just looking at the markets for today, looking at what it is that we went with for that. From CNBC, Dow closes more than 300 points lower as December sell-off resumes. From Sarah Min and Samantha Subin. It's trying. The sickness is trying to set in. Stocks fell Thursday as year-end sell-off returned to Wall Street following a brief respite this week. The Dow fell 348.99 points, or 1.05%, to 33,027.49. After falling as much as 803 points earlier in the session, the S&P dropped 1.5% to 3822.39. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq Composite was 2.18% lower at 10,476.12. The decline follows a 326-point rally in the Dow on Wednesday after better-than-expected earnings from Nike and FedEx, as well as strong consumer sentiment for December. The S&P and the Nasdaq surged 1.49% and 1.54% respectively on Wednesday. However, the selling returned Thursday as investors remained concerned that further monetary tightening from central banks around the world will push the economy into a recession. Tech shares were among the loss leaders, with semiconductor companies such as Lam Research and AMD down nearly 8.7% and 5.6% respectively. I'm leaning short on the equity markets, David Tepper, founder of Appaloosa Management, said in an interview on CNN's Squawk Box on Thursday. The upside downside just doesn't make sense to me, and when I have so many central banks telling me what they're going to do. Stock futures fell to their lows following the comments from the influential hedge fund manager. So far in December, the Dow is down 4.5%, while the S&P and the Nasdaq have tumbled 6.3% and 8.7% respectively. All three major averages are slated to break a 3-year win streak and post their worst yearly performance since 2008. Tesla shares dropped nearly 8.9% after the automaker began to offer a $7,500 discount in some of its models, adding to investor concerns of slowing demand for electric vehicles. We will be talking about that towards the bottom of the show because it does look like the demand and the desire for electric vehicles has been largely inflated. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be looking at AMC is dropping more than 7% as well after announcing a capital raise. So that's what we see coming out of our markets. But what could be driving the markets? What could be making this harder here? We're going to start on the big news of the day with Fox News. Words that I hate saying. From Fox News, Senate passes $1.7 trillion with a T spending bill with help from Republicans. From Harris Alick. We'll be skipping around on this a little bit because there's a lot of big news here, including who got involved in this, as Grant was already telling us. The Senate on Thursday approved a $1.7 trillion spending bill with help from more than a dozen Republican lawmakers after a fight over immigration policy nearly derailed the legislation. And that's the thing that almost derailed it. A fight over immigration policy, not the fact that it's $1.7 trillion and it's put in place now to stretch through until next year, all the way up into September, barring the incoming House majority from being involved in the finances for almost the entire fiscal year. But it was the immigration that was the sticking point. In a 68-29 vote, the Senate passed a bill that provides $858 billion for defense, $787 billion for non-defense programs, and nearly $45 billion for military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. The more than 4,000-page bill funds the government for the rest of the fiscal year and includes 7,200 earmarks totaling more than $15 billion. And that's not everything that's in here either. Let's pull out the old calculator. The old calculator here, 858,000 million billion plus 787,000 million billion plus 45 billion. Does bring us very close, yes. Okay, this is actually a little bit closer than I thought this was going to be for the 1.7. $1.69 trillion. Just on the numbers they gave us. Plus another 15 billion, which brings us over the 1.7 trillion mark. Senate passage sends the bill to the House, where Speaker Pelosi is expected to hold a vote as early as Thursday evening to allow lawmakers to depart for the Christmas holiday. The bill is so important to get done because it'll be good for our families, our veterans, The national security, even for the health of our democratic institutions, said Democratic Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer. Although only a majority vote was needed, a handful of Republicans voted with every single Senate Democrat to pass the bill. Republican support was slightly lower than the 21 GOP votes on the measure garnered earlier this week to overcome the Senate's 60-vote filibuster threshold. While both parties negotiated the spending bill in the Senate, it generated significant opposition from Republicans. Several Senate Republicans even mounted a last-minute push to block the measure in the lead-up to the final vote, arguing the GOP-controlled House could exact larger concessions from President Biden come January. The Republicans sought to amend the bill in ways Democrats said would make it impossible to pass in the House. But see, and once again, that's not the point. And by the way, it's not impossible to pass in the House. There's $1.7 trillion buried in this monstrosity. That again, I remind you, will fund the government until September, which means the first time the incoming House Republicans who might get concessions out of President Biden, as if that's actually going to happen, the first time they could actually talk about this will be probably about next August, which was the plan right from the beginning. And I said it before Election Day. I said it long before Election Day. The problem that we're going to come with, the problem that we're going to have with this stupid thing, is the fact that they are going to only fund into December, just long enough. And we had the omnibus coming up at the end of the fiscal year. And the proposal was get enough in there to, quote, fund the government, as if that's actually a real thing, but enough to fund the government, to keep the government open until January when the new Congress came in. But we all knew what was going to happen, and we all knew how it was going to happen from the moment that they decided to bring it out into the middle of December. Number one, they didn't want to see the government shut down after Christmas, but number two, they wanted to see what the congressional makeup was going to be. And yes, there was a flop sweat panic to come out and make sure that this got through and funded all the way up through September. Instead of going another short term and letting the new people that are represented by the people who voted them in, or representing rather the people that voted them in, actually get a say in how the government operates for the next year. Senate Republicans should instead support a short-term spending bill allowing the new Congress with the incoming Republican House to start the spending process over again in January, said Mike Lee of Utah. Late Wednesday, the bill was almost derailed by a Republican push to add immigration language. In exchange for agreeing to speed up the vote process, Lee wanted a vote to maintain a Trump-era immigration policy in place that had prevented millions of immigrants from entering the U.S. The so-called Title 42 policy, which was invoked during the height of the Pinko-Pox pandemic, allows immigration to be curtailed for public health reasons. And this again, and it's the dichotomy of the bill. It's the dichotomy of immigration and COVID. Because Republicans want to keep Title 42 in place, which was put in place explicitly for COVID, which Republicans say is over, and Democrats want to dash Title 42 to bits, which was put in place specifically for COVID, and yet tell us that we should all be in terrible fear, wearing masks and getting our 9th and 10th shots, because COVID is still going to rampage and kill us all. Lee's demand froze the Senate for several hours, and he accused Democrats of dodging the issue because the measure might easily pass. While popular with some moderate Democrats, the Title 42 policy is widely opposed by progressives in the House and would have likely tanked the bill. By Thursday, Schumer agreed to give Lee his vote, but also set up a vote on an amendment from Kyrsten Sinema that would have kept Title 42 in place and increased funding for immigration enforcement and processing. The Senate rejected Sinema's amendment, which required 60 votes for passage, but Sinema's language allowed moderate Democrats facing tough re-election challenges in 24, like Sinema and John Tester, to vote for keeping Title 42 in place while opposing Lee's amendment, which also failed due to lack of Democratic support. This was a runaround designed by Schumer to protect the budget without putting vulnerable senators out on a limb, said a Senate Democratic aide. Everyone won except for Mike Lee. No. See, and that's the thing is, they say everybody won, as in everybody in the Senate won, except for Mike Lee. No. The American people lost. And I say this often, and I mean it often, but the American people lost with this thing. They absolutely did. And now again, the money printer goes burr for another $1.7 trillion with no return except for a more fierce army of IRS agents to go after us if we don't pay all of our taxes. So, Merry Christmas, folks. Let's grab one from our friends over at NPR. Senate passes major spending deal that now heads to House. And this is from Barbara Sprunt. And remember, even with the taxpayer subsidies that are going to be coming off of this new bill, we still need to donate and make sure we get more money. It's not your money, comrade. It's our money out to NPR so they can tell you that anybody who blocked this is evil and just wants to kill grandma. And anybody who supports this is good and wants to go back and redistribute all wealth into you, because NPR is never printing reality. National Progressive Radio. Let's see what it is that they have to say. With a looming Friday deadline to fund the government, the Senate has approved a nearly $1.7 trillion government funding bill by a bipartisan vote of 68 to 29. The package now goes to the House for approval. This is one of the most significant appropriations packages that we've done in a very long time. Chuck U. Schumer said on the Senate floor Thursday afternoon, "The range of people it helps is very large indeed. After a lot of hard work and compromise, the Senate is funding the government with an aggressive investment in American families, workers, and national defense." The bill funds the military and the government agencies through September 30th of 2023, which is its first problem. It includes pay raises for service members and government workers, nearly $40 billion in emergency aid to areas struck by public disasters, and over $44 billion in aid for Ukraine. And I know why the pay raises for service members and government workers was in there. Not necessarily for the government workers, but this is an excuse for those who are government shills to come back out and look over at Republicans who voted against this. I mean, the 29 that voted against this were entirely of the Republican Party. And now they can come back out and make the commercial and say, this Republican senator voted against the omnibus package, which means he hates the troops. That's right, the omnibus package gave the troops a pay raise. And Republicans say they're always for the military, but they just hate the troops. The bill also makes changes to the 1887 Electoral Count Act, which has nothing to do with budget, by the way, aimed at making it more difficult to block the certification of a presidential election. The reform includes clarifying that the vice president has a purely ceremonial role as Congress certifies the presidential elections. Yes, they had to go and waste legislation and text in a 4,000-page bill to hide this in there and then come out and brag about it, because the vice president never had a role in the certifying of the election, only a ceremonial position. So now they have to make a law saying that he never had a role, and it was only a ceremonial position. Sounds like a pretty fucking sweet deal, excuse my language. The package adds policy provisions to expand federal protections for pregnant workers, something that should not be done on a federal level. Something that should not even be done on a state level. That is a draw to get people to go apply for jobs and out the people who really do want to slave drive pregnant women. We can shame people into doing these kinds of things. Schumer had asked senators to vote on amendments expeditiously as the chamber raced to pass the bill ahead of a deadline on Friday at midnight when the government funding is set to expire. Lawmakers also had a personal impetus to keep things speedy, heading home for the holidays without getting derailed by the approaching winter storm. Ahead of the vote, senators applauded outgoing Senator Patrick Leahy and Richard Shelby, who helped negotiate the massive spending bill. Say their names: shame, for shame, 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 shame. Lawmakers continued to work late into the night on Wednesday on how to advance the funding bill after attending the address to a joint meeting of Congress by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And we talked about Title 42 and what happened there, so we can skip over that. We'll skip this one too, because this is all about the Title 42, which we talked about in the Fox News article. Something else that's buried in there, though, that hasn't been talked about so far: massive changes to retirement system buried in behemoth omnibus bill. From Ben Zisloft. Significant changes to the retirement system are included in this $1.7 trillion omnibus bill moving through Congress. The 4,155-page piece of legislation could codify $858 billion in defense spending, nearly $773 billion for discretionary programs. Among other provisions, the bill funds border security for foreign nations, offers contributions for LGBTQI, RAGIT, OMXTRAM, TIOU, sometimes Y, Pride centers, and christens various federal properties with the names of powerful lawmakers. Secure Act 2.0, an overhaul to the current retirement savings regime, is also buried in the bill, which members of Congress must pass Friday to fund the government through the current fiscal year. Among the most significant changes is the automatic enrollment of employees in 401k or 403b programs for companies that offer matching benefits. According to a summary from the Senate Finance Committee, workers would be required to enroll at a rate of 3% before contributions automatically increase by 1% each year until a 10% threshold is released. And, of course, these people have absolutely no position. This needs to be challenged in court because that's unconstitutional. A benefit that your employer puts in place for you is a discussion between you and your employer. Yet another regulation to make it harder to do business. Now, yes, should you be putting this kind of rate into your 401k? Absolutely, you should. Is it the government's business to make sure that you're doing it? No. And a fool and his money are soon parted. Employees could choose to opt out of the program at any time, while exemptions exist for small businesses with 10 or fewer employees, church programs, and government plans. Of course the government is exempt from that. Why wouldn't they be? Well, I guess a part of that is because government plans do typically have a better pension than most private sector because, it comes off of your taxpayer dollars. The Senate Finance Committee said that automatic enrollment would boost participation by eligible employees generally, and particularly for Black, Latinx, and lower-wage employees. It also sounds like a good way to artificially inflate the stock market, to make everybody say the economy is doing good, but royally screw people when the stock market does tank. One portion of the bill would allow companies to make matching 401k contributions on behalf of employees attempting to pay off student loans, rather than making deposits into the retirement savings accounts. The measure is intended to assist employees who may not be able to save for retirement because they're overwhelmed with student debt and thus are missing out on available matching contributions for retirement plans. The new provision occurs as policy from the Biden admin to forgive as much as $20,000 in student loan debt per borrower awaits a ruling from the Supreme Court. We know about that. Another portion of the Secure Act 2.0 would allow employers to offer small, immediate financial incentives for contributing to a retirement plan. Though current law bars employers from offering gift cards and similar incentives to boost participation, the new legislation would remove such restrictions. The bill would allow savers to pull $1,000 from their 401k or IRA account to meet an emergency expense without incurring the 10% penalty for early withdrawals. Only one such withdrawal could occur each year, while savers could only be eligible for other emergency funds in the subsequent 3 years if they return the original $1,000 withdrawal. Insured Retirement Institute Chief Government and Political Affairs Officer Paul Richmond asserted in a statement that the Secure Act 2.0, which follows the Secure Act passed 3 years ago, would help millions more workers and retirees with significant improvements to the nation's private retirement system and add billions to the retirement savings for small business workers, part-time workers, employees with student loan debt, military spouses, low-income workers, and others. So there you go. The government is now taking over the 401k business. A private agreement to incentivize people to choose your company over any other company is now going to be mandated by the government. Aren't you excited? Here is what we're all here for, and I know that Grant was already giving us a listing of this. From Newsweek. Full list of Republican senators who voted to pass the $1.7 trillion omnibus bill. Although we don't really have to go, we can go into Newsweek, or we can get one from The Plant, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. 18 Republican traitors who voted for the $1.7 trillion omni-monster to send your money to defend Ukraine's border, but not America's border. And here they are, in alphabetical order. Blunt, Boozman, Capito, Collins, no surprise there. Cornyn, no shock there. Cotton, a little bit surprise. Graham, Linda Graham, Inhofe, McConnell, Moran, Murkowski, Rob Portman, Mitt Romney, Rounds, Shelby, John Thune, John Wicker, and Young. Some of these I didn't know their first names for. Many of them I actually did, oddly enough, because they're all the regular players. They're all the regular neoconservatives who did nothing but come down and kneel down to the Democrats whenever they said, "Kneel down before us or we'll call you a racist." It's all the names that we know. It really is. And there's Vladimir Zelensky carrying a stack of cash out of the house. I think that one was doctored, though. What do you guys think? Do you think that was doctored? Do you think that was shooped? King of Polls, if you had the chance to vote on this $1.7 trillion bill, would you vote yes, no, or would you not vote? No, and we're also, by the way, going to get this one honked a little bit, I think. But we're not going to do that in the main window. But by the way, if you do want to go through the Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene thread and go find this poll and vote on it, you should. Because I think there are a number of people out there that need to be reminded that this is garbage. House GOP group vowing retribution on pro-omnibus Republicans grows. From Emily Brooks. A group of House Republicans threatening to block priorities from GOP senators who vote for the $1.7 trillion omnibus funding bill has grown to 31. Which is weird because 29 people voted on it. Or voted against it, rather. The 31 current and incoming members, so there's some incoming, that's why, signing an open letter led by Chip Roy, Republican Senate colleagues on Wednesday, marks an increase from a similar Monday letter that had 13 names. The new copy also made a direct reference to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, the Turtle Man himself. The released legislative text confirms this omnibus is an assault on the American people. As such, we reiterate that if any omnibus passes in the remaining days in Congress, we will oppose and whip opposition to any legislative priority of those senators who vote for this passage, including Republican leader, the letter said. We will oppose any rule, any consent request, suspension voice vote, or roll call vote of any such Senate bill, and will otherwise do everything in our power to thwart even the smallest legislative and policy efforts of those senators. Additional Republicans signing on to the Wednesday letter include Reps. Diana Harshbarger of Tennessee, Barry Moore of Alabama, Lauren Boebert of Colorado, and Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, and Reps-elect Keith Self of Texas and Eric Burlinson of Missouri. It includes several departing members who will not have any power over Senate votes next year. Jody Heiss of Georgia, Mira Flores of Texas, Louis Gohmert of Texas, and Yvette Harrell of New Mexico. The second letter urging opposition to the omnibus comes after House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy endorsed the threat to vote on the threat to thwart those bills on Tuesday, pledging that bills from GOP senators who vote for the omnibus would be DOA if he's Speaker. Good. McCarthy is facing opposition to his candidacy for Speaker from many of those who signed the letter, though others do support him. Senators dismissed the threat on Tuesday. The reality is this kind of chest thumping and immaturity doesn't instill confidence in their ability to lead. Now, maybe it helps Kevin get elected Speaker, said Kevin Kramer of North Dakota. McCarthy attended a GOP lunch on Wednesday to lobby against the omnibus, but sources told The Hill at the time that his rhetoric was largely toned down from his public statements. Which is, by the way, what they need to do. Now, will they do it in practice? Most likely not. In fact, most likely, bills coming from Mr. McConnell will be elevated to the top because he's the minority leader. John Kennedy, with a video, telling us why he voted against the $1.7 trillion omnibus spending bill. So let's listen to Senator Kennedy.
The United States Senate has passed a budget for the federal government for next year. I expect the House of Representatives, which is controlled also by the Democratic Party, to concur in the Senate's proposal. I voted against the budget, and I wanted to explain to the people in Louisiana why. Number one, this budget was basically put together by three people. Senator McConnell in the Senate, Senator Schumer in the Senate, and Speaker Pelosi in the House. But more to the point, here's the main reason I voted against the budget. Inflation. As I've said before, inflation is ravaging the American dream. It's a cancer on the American dream. And we're not going to get control of it until Congress stops spending so much money. Congress, in order to get control of inflation, has got to spend less money. We've got to slow the rate of growth of spending and debt. Now, look, I'm not naive. There are many people here in Washington, not just on the Democratic side. There are many big government Republicans as well. And their attitude is we can't possibly spend enough money. If they ran out of money to spend and couldn't borrow any more, they would think about taking out a reverse mortgage on Alaska to get the money. But there are enough Republicans on the Capitol Hill for us to be able to slow the rate of growth of spending. And this bill didn't do that.
Sound words from John Kennedy, and that's what we've been yelling at Republicans since a lot of this stuff began, is the fact of, just stop the spending. Stop it. Stop doing it. It's easy enough. Put the sand hat ball on the wrong side. Yeah, we got to definitely go with the non over the ear ones for tomorrow because that doesn't fit. But I mean, as far as Kennedy goes, it is. He's right on the nose with it. But they're going to keep voting for it. Then if they run out of money that's funny when he says if they run out of money, because they'll not run out of money. They will go and print off more, and it'll go brrr, and the next thing you know, we'll get another big inflation number, and the Federal Reserve will work as hard as they can to keep you out of the markets while letting the government go back and do whatever the hell it is that they want. But thank you, John Kennedy. And that is the omnibus. We've got plenty more to go over here. Let's get the live chat back up here. Let's put some music back up here too. Let's talk Zelensky. From the Hill. Zelensky address meets divided House GOP preparing to grab the purse string. Now, this is obviously from yesterday because they didn't grab the purse strings. In fact, they're going to be voting this through. From Emily Brooks. Excuse me. House Republicans offered mixed reactions to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's address to a joint meeting of Congress, foreshadowing a bumpier road that his country will face in securing future U.S. aid once the GOP takes control of the House in a few weeks. Republican supporters of aiding Ukraine's efforts against Russia praised Zelensky's speech. Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania said that Zelensky had overwhelming support in the chamber and will continue to have that. Michael McCall of Texas, who's set to chair the House Foreign Affairs Committee next year, expressed hope that the speech would help push a more aggressive focus from the U.S. on military assistance in Ukraine. Which turns us from a Cold War and a proxy war into a hot war. Every time we get them what they need, they win. But this admin is so concerned about being provocative, said McCall. We're not doing what we need to do to have them win this thing more quickly. The longer this thing drags out, the more difficult it's going to be, and we're not giving them what they need. But critics of Ukraine aid showed little openness to being open to changing their minds because of the speech. Okay, we need to do something about this. Maybe. Why can't I get rid of that guy? Okay, I guess I can't do anything about that. Somebody with a sword over on Twitter, get rid of that guy. Or Twitch, rather. Get rid of that dude. If KTZed was here, he'd be gone already. She doesn't miss a beat. Just boom, bum. Oh, I see a .com. You're gone. Let's see. But critics of the Ukraine aid showed little openness to being open to changing their minds because of the speech, which is good. Walking into the address, Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio said that he did not think Zelensky should be speaking on the House floor. No, he shouldn't. You are correct. We should be focused on trying to contain the war, not expand the war. And this kind of sends a message that we're kind of okay with expanding the war, and I think that we should be sending a different message, Davidson said. To which Nancy Pelosi and a slew of online Democrats on Twitter all looked out and said, "Oh, well, you must be a Putin puppet then." He followed up with a quip about Zelensky's more casual-looking olive green military garb. He's dressed more for the auditorium, so he should be talking to us down there. Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, and Jim Jordan sat out most of the standing ovations during the speech, though Boebert stood up while Zelensky entered the chamber. That's respectful because Regardless of your feelings of him, he is a foreign dignitary and head of state. Even if I disagreed with him, I would still stand for him to enter. Boebert said in a video after the speech that she would not support any more money to Ukraine until there is a full audit of where already approved funding has gone, which I agree with. Matt Gaetz left and Lauren Boebert arrived. That's the photo caption, which is weird because usually they put that in a different font. Kevin McCarthy, who has said the House Republicans will not send a blank check to Ukraine in the next Congress, carefully navigated the optics of Zelensky's visit. Many of the right-wing House GOP critics of aid to Ukraine also are withholding support for his speakership. McCarthy attended a meeting with Zelensky and other top congressional leaders, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and Nancy Pelosi ahead of the speech, and was part of the escort committee. Bringing the president into the chamber, he joined in standing ovations, but he was not present for another media-centric moment when the other three congressional leaders walked into the Capitol Rotunda. Standing in front of his fiercest supporters as well as his admirers, Zelensky made a direct argument in favor of aid to his country. You put money in country. I put through washing machine, make nice and clean. Then you come back and spend on campaign. This is a pretty good deal. Your money is not charity. It is investment in, well, he's got one part of that right. It is investment in global security and democracy that we have in a responsible way. Okay, well then let's audit it. If you handle it in the most responsible way, then we do audit. Let me put this in your language. We do audit. We decide. We look at what you have. But he likely had little chance of swaying the fiercest GOP opponents to aid. Thomas Massie tweeted that he was not in D.C. and would not attend the speech of a Ukrainian lobbyist. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who did not attend the address, tweeted earlier in the day that global foreign aid is like Americans being... if the kids... And I already dropped the F-bomb, I know. But if you got the kids listening, it's time to do earmuffs. Global foreign aid is like Americans being raped every day at the hands of their own elected leaders. According to The Hill poll, only 86 of 213 House Republicans attended the speech Wednesday evening. More than a third of the House members had active letters to vote by proxy on Wednesday, with many worrying about weather disrupting travel just before Christmas. GOP, well, and a part of this too, by the way, is, I hate to say it, was a distraction from the fact that they released the Trump tax returns and they found out that he paid a buttload of taxes. Except for 1 year at the end of his presidency. Chip Roy said Zelensky's speech was more of the theater that has been orchestrated by the current outgoing Democratic leadership of the current Senate leadership in order to prop up a belief that $47 billion, again, with no debate at all, is just going to be magically created out of thin air and sent over to Ukraine. Republican skepticism and resistance to Ukraine funding is layered. Some members oppose aid altogether based on America First or anti-war philosophy. Others support more military aid but less economic and humanitarian aid. And still others believe the U.S.-Mexico border should be prioritized more. I probably stand against a lot of people that are against Ukrainian aid in saying that if I could actually get a detailed way that it was spent and have it audited to make sure that it matches, I'd be more okay with it. Not completely okay with it, but more okay with it. But I also feel if we actually got that audit, it would be because the amount of money going over there is much, much less. skip that one. We'll go to this one here. Zelensky's address to Congress puts him in a category with Churchill, Netanyahu, and Mandela. No. No, it doesn't. That is a lie. From Olivia Olander. Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine addressed Congress for a second time on Wednesday, and for the first time in person, a track record of FaceTime with the world's most powerful legislative body that's exceeded only by Winston Churchill of Britain and Netanyahu of Israel. Addresses by foreign leaders are not unprecedented, but they are relatively uncommon. In the decade before Russia invaded Ukraine, 9 foreign leaders appeared before a joint meeting. Since the war started in February of this year, Zelensky has appeared before Congress twice, and Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska, also addressed an informal meeting in July. Churchill addressed the U.S. Congress twice during World War II and again in the 50s. Netanyahu, Nelson Mandela, and Yitzhak Rabin are the only other people recorded by House to have ever addressed Congress more than once. Netanyahu's 2015 speech came in defiance of Barack Obama. Republicans in Congress invited Netanyahu without telling the Obama admin first, a breach of protocol. But he knew. I'm going to tell you right now, he knew, because Netanyahu, as a foreign dignitary, got Secret Service protection, which does still track through the executive branch. At the meeting on Wednesday, the Ukrainian president appealed broadly to members' sense of justice as he asked for continued support. He also met with Joe Biden on Wednesday following an announcement from the State Department of $1.85 billion in new aid that included sought-after Patriot defense missile systems. The trip marked the first time that he left Ukraine since the start of the war. But no, he is still not on par with them. By quantity, yes, he's on par with them, but by message, by ideas, by ideals, he is not. Because, see, these people that did address Congress didn't come in there specifically to beg for money. Here we go. From CNN, and this is video only. Watch Zelensky unveil a flag during historic speech to Congress. Further cementing the fact that this was a photo op and a theater production. Let's watch.
When I was in Bakhmut yesterday, our heroes gave me the flag, the battle flag, the flag of those who defend Ukraine, Europe, and the world at the cost of their lives. They asked me to bring this flag to you, to the US Congress, to members of the House of Representatives and senators whose decisions can save millions of people. So let these decisions be taken. Let this flag stay with you, ladies and gentlemen. This flag is a symbol of our victory in this war. We stand, we fight, and we will win because we are united. Ukraine, America, and the entire free world. Just one thing, if I can, the last thing, thank you so much. May God protect our brave troops and citizens. May God forever bless the United States of America. Merry Christmas and happy, victorious New Year. Slava Ukraini!
What are we expecting and when
When I was in Bakhmut.
So one of the things that I note about that is I was to the understanding after the Capitol Selfie Fest that flying a foreign flag in the Capitol is treasonous. Because isn't that the big crime that Alexandria Ocasio-Chavez told us was the big crime? Is they flew the Confederate flag in the Capitol. Oh no! But yes, it's all a photo op. Everything that's been in the Ukraine from the beginning is a photo op. It's nothing but a photo op. Just like what we were talking about with that's artillery going on in the background. Really? Because it sounded like it was put into the music track. I don't think that was artillery. I think it was another photo op. Everything that we've seen with this has been a photo op. All right, from the Hill. 5 biggest moments from Zelensky's address to Congress, which was 26 minutes, by the way. I debated watching the whole thing, but, it was 26 minutes. We've got a lot to go over yet. And that little toad is really not worth my time. Maybe off air, but not on air. 5 biggest moments from Zelensky's address to Congress from Michael Schnell. I will not get sick. I will not get sick. I will not get sick. Number 1, a packed entrance. Zelensky entered a packed House chamber Wednesday with lawmakers from both parties and chambers, cabinet officials, and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine coming together to view the president's historic speech. But go get your extra booster because we're still all going to die from COVID. The chamber erupted in a standing ovation, and Zelensky shook hands with a number of lawmakers while walking down the aisle towards the dais. The applause continued well after Zelensky arrived at the microphone, stretching for roughly 3 minutes at one point when attendees were still clapping. Lauren Boebert, who has been critical of the U.S. aid to Ukraine in the past, sat down. Harris and Pelosi, both of whom wore blue suits while presiding over the chamber during the meeting, greeted Zelensky when he arrived at the dais and shook his hand. It could be the last time 2 women preside over a joint meeting of Congress for a while. Pelosi is set to step down from her post as Democratic leader at the end of the year. Zelensky likens Ukraine's war to U.S. fight for independence. Are you serious? Are you dead serious? You already got your independence in the 90s. You're an independent nation. Now, see, and actually now I've got to listen to this speech because now I want to hear this. See, what I understood from the beginning of this is that Crimea aside, because that was liberated from the Ukraine 8 years ago, but Crimea aside, the people that are in the southern region were fighting for independence from you. And in order to get that, they had to go back and ally with Russia before they annexed these regions. Russia is not occupying your capital. They're not trying to make you into Little Russia, although they could in a moment's notice. This is not a fight for independence. You miserable, miserable liar. To ensure Bakhmut is not just stronghold that holds back Russian army, but for Russian army to completely pull out. More cannons and shells are needed. Just like Battle of Saratoga, fight for Bakhmut will change trajectory of war for independence and for freedom. You're already independent. And again, I remind you, there has been no attempt to take over your entire country. If your patriots stop the rise of terror against cities, it will let Ukrainian patriots work to full to defend freedom. At another point in his speech, Zelensky cited the Battle of the Bulge when underscoring Russian aggression. Russian tactic is primitive. They burn down and destroy everything they see. They send thugs to front lines. They send convicts to war. Be careful with that, because that's kind of what we did in this country too, when we became a country. It's what the Union did as well, by the way. Similar to other tyranny, which is in Battle of Bulge. Just like brave Americans who held lines and fought Hitler's forces during Christmas of '44, which inspired largest fighting force in my country, by the way. Brave Ukrainian soldiers who were inspired by Hitler's fighting force, we called him Azov, are doing the same to Putin's forces this Christmas. Zelensky, who before entering politics was a comedian and actor, showed moments of humor during Wednesday's address, eliciting chuckles in the chamber. Unity, but not completely. Yeah, the people who attended were probably like, oh, Putin! But a lot of people probably didn't really care. And in a sign of bipartisanship, Liz Cheney of the Uniparty sat on the Democratic side of the chamber for Zelensky's speech, which is where she belonged in the beginning. And the flag exchange, which we just watched. Following the simp, Representative Greg Stanton, inspiring remarks from Ukrainian President Zelensky. Our countries, a world apart, are united by values of life, family, honor, faith, and democracy. Yes. Life. Yeah, no, there's nothing about life in there. Family, honor, faith, and democracy. Your atheistic regime went out and criminalized opposition parties. Yeah, democracy. Which I guess you can't really argue against Democrats about that, because that is that's their MO as well. They want to criminalize opposition parties to them, namely MAGA. Alright, and here's now that we're moving off the Ukrainian thing, before we do get completely off of that, I do want to remind you why I don't really want Biden to be in charge of sending foreign aid to Ukraine, because it all goes unaccountable. From the blaze, Biden had been sued for sending $500 million that allegedly funded policy responsible for killing hundreds of U.S. and Israeli citizens. From Candace Hathaway. On Tuesday, a lawsuit filed against the Biden admin and Secretary of State Blinken that accused the admin of sending over $500 million of taxpayer money to the Palestinian Authority, despite being allegedly aware that the Palestinian Authority was funding a policy responsible for killing hundreds of Israeli and American citizens, the Daily Caller News Foundation reported. The lawsuit, which was filed by America First Legal Foundation, argued that the Biden admin sent large sums of money to the Palestinian Authority, a government that has supported paying terrorists who commit acts of violence against Israelis via the Pennsylvania Martyrs Fund. The program, also referred to as Pay to Slay, is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. and Israeli citizens. Taylor Force, a 28-year-old U.S. Army veteran, was murdered by Palestinian terrorists while on a graduate program trip to Israel. In response to the atrocity, former President Trump and Congress passed the Taylor Force Act in 2017, which prevents U.S. taxpayer dollars from getting to the PA until the regime ends its pay-to-slay policy. The lawsuit argues the Biden admin has continued to send funds despite the legislation. After announcing in May 2020 that he planned to restore the funding to the PA, Biden signed off on over $360 million to the PA the following year. According to the Palestinian official, that same year the PA sent $181 million to terrorists who committed acts of violence against Israel. And you guys were worried that everything would be unaccountable going to Ukraine. Look at how well Palestine accounted the money that was sent over to them to show that they sent it right into terrorists. They allocated it properly, they documented it properly, and yes, it's going right to the terrorists. Excuse me. All right, some border stuff here, since everybody's border but ours matters. From CNN, Arizona to remove makeshift border wall as part of a lawsuit, court filing says. From Priscilla Alvarez, Arizona has agreed to remove shipping containers placed as a makeshift wall along its shared border with Mexico as part of an ongoing lawsuit, according to a Wednesday court filing. In August, Doug Ducey, a Republican and critic of the Biden admin's border policies, issued an executive order telling the State Department of Emergency and Military Affairs to use shipping containers to fill in the gaps along the border, and did so without official permits or authorization, CNN previously reported. Arizona's had enough, he said at the time. We can't wait any longer. Yeah, that's about what it is here too, Luke. The 8,800-pound 9 by 40 feet containers stand about 22 feet tall when stacked, welded together, and topped with 4 feet of razor wire, the governor's office said, while the border fencing built during the Trump admin is about 30 feet high. The federal government has been battling with the state ever since to get the containers removed. Earlier this month, the Biden admin sued Arizona for placing the shipping containers at the border. Since then, the government and Arizona reached an agreement to dismantle the containers, according to the latest filing. By January 4th, 2023, to the extent feasible and so as to not cause damage to the U.S. lands, properties, and natural resources, Arizona will remove all previously installed shipping containers and associated equipment, materials, vehicles, and other objects from the U.S. properties in the U.S. Border Patrol Yuma sector, including from lands over which the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation holds an easement on the Cocopah Indian Tribe's West Reservation, the filing says. For more than a year, the federal government has been touting their efforts to resume construction of a permanent border barrier, Ducey spokesperson CJ Karamarjan said in a statement on Thursday. So, not only, by the way, are they not going to go finish the wall down there, though they promised that they would, not only are they not going to do that, they're going to use the court system to go and open it all right back up. But don't worry, they're not for open borders. From the Tennessean, Governor Bill Lee, Fed's plan to transport some migrants to Tennessee as Title 42 ends. So again, it's okay when the State Department does it, but God forbid Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis and Doug Ducey do it. From Maria Timms, federal officials may plan to transport some migrants to Tennessee amid an ongoing legal battle over immigration policy, according to a statement released by Governor Bill Lee on Tuesday. Lee's office said Tennessee was notified Monday afternoon by President Biden's admin that multiple busloads of single adult detainees from ICE facilities in New Orleans might be moved to Tennessee as soon as this week. Further details on the plan were not immediately available. The White House did not immediately respond for a request from the Tennessean for more clarification on the transfers. Once again, it's A-OK, just fine, if Biden and the State Department do it. But if Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis go and do that and put them in places surrounded by people who voted for the open borders, they're committing a hate crime and a war crime. From CNN, let's talk about Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried released on $250 million bond after appearing in a U.S. court. From Kara Scannell. Sam Bankman-Fried, the disgraced founder of crypto exchange FTX, appeared in a U.S. courtroom in New York on Thursday to face 8 counts of fraud and conspiracy. A judge released him on a $250 million bond in his first appearance on American soil since his arrest last week in the Bahamas. The judge agreed to a bail package proposed by federal prosecutors and lawyers for Bankman-Fried that also requires the former so-called crypto king to have an electronic monitoring bracelet and be under house arrest at his parents' home in Palo Alto, California. He has already surrendered his passport. Like that would matter. The judge said Bankman-Fried would be arraigned on the charges that he stole billions of dollars from customers of his crypto trading platform at a future date. Bankman-Fried was escorted into the courtroom by a U.S. Marshal wearing a navy suit jacket and a white button-down shirt. The sounds of clanking from the shackles around his ankles could be heard as he walked to a seat at the defense table, which again, as a white-collar criminal, is pretty much all for show. They're coming out here, he's going to be the sacrificial lamb, and he's totally not going to kill himself either, by the way. His parents, law professors at Stanford, were seated in the third row behind him. Bankman-Fried spoke once during the hearing when the magistrate judge, Gabriel Gorenstein, asked him if he understood the consequences he would face if he skipped out on bail, saying, "Yes, I do." Other bail conditions include mental health treatment, surrender of any firearms, and prohibitions against opening any new lines of credit, businesses, or engaging in transactions over $1,000 without the government's approval. The judge said Bankman-Fried has sufficient notoriety to stop anyone from engaging with him on business deals. Yeah, I don't think that that's going to matter. I think he's going to die. Mr. Bankman-Fried perpetrated fraud of epic proportions, said prosecutor Nicholas Roos. Roos said evidence against Bankman-Fried includes multiple cooperating witnesses, testimony of other employees of the companies, and encrypted messages. So he's out of jail, released to his parents' house, with incriminating information on Democrats, and no security. Well, I hope you enjoyed the run that you had on this planet, Sam Bankman-Fried. I hope you enjoyed your 30 years. And I don't know when your birthday is, so I don't know if you're going to see 31, but I got this feeling you're not going to see 32. From MarketWatch, new charges tie Bankman-Fried to damning FTX allegations with testimony from ex-girlfriend Ellison and a fellow co-founder. From Steve Goldstein. One of the curiosities about Sam Bankman-Fried's media tour ahead of his arrest was the degree to which the FTX founder was putting the blame on his former girlfriend Carolyn Ellison, who became chief executive of the affiliated fund Alameda Research. For instance, Bankman-Fried was asked on Twitter Spaces, held by the account Unusual Whales, about FTX deposits that went to Alameda. So take this with a little bit of grain of salt, but I believe it's the case that up until, as of, a year and a half ago, certainly as of like 2.5 years ago when I was transitioning out of running Alameda, that as of those times, I believe that it was the case that this number was massively smaller and ended up by, late 2022, said Bankman-Fried. What new charges made by the Department of Justice and Securities Exchange Commission make is clear that Ellison, as well as fellow FTX co-founder Gary Wang, are now cooperating against Bankman-Fried. Both pleaded guilty to federal charges including wire fraud, securities fraud, and commodities fraud. Both U.S. Attorney Damian Williams of the Southern District of New York, as well as SEC press release, note the cooperation of the pair, and the SEC complaint ties Bankman-Fried to some of the most damning allegations with their assistance. For instance, on the idea that there was a backdoor that allowed Bankman-Fried to take customer funds, the new complaint says that Wayne created the software code which Bankman-Fried used. Bankman-Fried had maintained in a media interview he was not capable of creating such a code. Dude, this guy is totally a fall guy. Bankman-Fried and Wang, with Ellison's knowledge and consent, had exempted Alameda from the risk mitigation measures in place on the FTX platform. The SEC complaint says Ellison, acting at the direction of Bankman-Fried, engaged in automated purchases of FTT tokens on various platforms in order to increase the prices of those tokens and inflate the value of Alameda's collateral, which allowed Alameda to borrow even more money from external lenders, the SEC said. With the knowledge that Wang and Ellison, Bankman-Fried, directed FTX to divert billions more into customer assets to Alameda to ensure that Alameda maintained its lending relationships after crypto assets began plummeting in May of 2020, the SEC said. So, yeah. And again, I still don't think this guy's going to make it to trial. All right, we got a few more things going on here, and then we will do a thing that I like and a thing that I hate, which I actually might have to go pull up because I completely blanked on doing that. So I think I've got video that we've got to watch a little bit later here. If not, we will be off in the background. But from the Blaze report, Pelosi and Democrat leadership played a critical role in creating a Capitol security plan that failed during January 6 protests. A group of House Republicans released a damning counter-report Wednesday detailing the key insights ignored in the narrative carefully constructed by the Democrat-led January 6 Select Committee concerning the Capitol protests in 2021. The 141-page report penned by the 5 Republicans originally nominated to sit on the House January 6 Select Committee reveals how House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office and Democrat leadership were closely involved in security decisions in the lead-up to and on January 6, 2021, and noted the reasons why the Capitol was ultimately left unprepared on the day of protests. The publication of this evidence that Pelosi and other Democrats may have been instrumental in rendering the Capitol vulnerable to infiltration by protesters comes just days after the House Speakers Committee recommended that former President Trump be hit with criminal charges. What are the details? Republican reps Rodney Davis, Jim Banks, Troy Nehls, Jim Jordan, and Kelly Armstrong were nominated by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy in 2021 to sit on the January 6 Select Committee. Pelosi voted the appointment of Banks and Jordan, prompting McCarthy to pull his other picks, reported The Hill. The same group of congressmen noted that when Speaker Pelosi made the unprecedented decision to reject Banks and Jordan from sitting on the January 6 Select Committee, we knew she intended to play politics instead of addressing the massive security failures that led to that day. We said that we would investigate and get to the bottom of why the Capitol was left so unprepared that day, and what needs to be done to make sure that our security apparatus is never left so unprepared again, they added in a joint statement. The House Republicans' resultant report did just that, identifying several reasons the Capitol was vulnerable on January 6th, and providing recommendations on the ways to bolster Capitol security in the future. McCarthy contrasted this report with the Select Committee, saying the latter has been focused on the political theater and posturing, whereas this report answers what the American people have asked since day one. Why the Capitol was so unprepared, and it outlines a plan for a more secure Capitol in the 118th Congress. Excuse me. The report indicates that the U.S. Capitol Police acquired enough information ahead of January 6 to anticipate and prepare for the violence that occurred. However, frontline officers and analysts at the USCP's Intelligence Division were undermined by the misplaced priorities of their leadership. Do you know why, by the way, I think this was all a setup? I mean, I think most people at this point who aren't coming out here and spouting that this was the most dangerous day in American history know that this was a setup in and of itself. But one of the big reasons why I believe this was a setup, and have for a very, very long time, is because the intelligence was there. Everybody and their brother knew that something was going to happen that day. I knew it a week and a half after the election. And I've mentioned this before. When I had a coworker who was telling me in our break room at the time that he planned to be one of the people at January 6th. And he didn't wind up being there, but he planned to be one of the people in there. And he says, earmuffs, by the way, because I'm going to do a direct quote from him. And he's a filthy old guy from Illinois. And he said, and I quote, "Hey, motherfucker, you know what? It's going to be one of these things where they better come back and give us what we want. Otherwise, we're all going to Washington D.C. and let them know what it is that we want. We're going to make them pay if they don't give us what they want, motherfucker." And I looked up at the time and said, "Bob, that's a trap. You don't take the fight to the government's front door. They are better at killing people than you are. My God, you're a veteran. You should know that. The government is really good at killing people that they don't want alive. And if you bring yourself right up to their front door, they will put that shiny assault rifle that you're not allowed to have, but they're allowed to have in the Capitol, up in the middle of your face and kill you." Now, mind you, again, I did think that there were going to be a lot more people that died as soon as I heard that they were going to do something in the Capitol in and around January. And I mean, most of us didn't know about the ceremonial count on January 6th before that day either. Which I found really weird that so many people found out about that in such a hurry after Election Day when the final count was and when they were all going to go vote. But everybody and their brother knew that people wanted to go there and be violent and do stuff. Whether they were led on by Trump himself or whether they were led on by mysterious people that glow in the dark that told them, "Hey, don't you want to go to the Capitol and air your grievances?" And I do think it was a setup. And once again, my big justification for that is the fact that nobody knew what happened on that day, prior to that day. Except for a few very, very, very astute civics students. Alright. The Washington Post got into the news here because they're doing layoffs right now. And while we're doing this, I'll go see if I can find a thing that I hate. Because I know what I'm going to use. I still don't know what I'm going to do for a thing that I like, but I know what I'm going to use for a thing I hate. So let's listen to what Clay Travis put out here.
We're not going to turn the town hall into a grievance session, please. I'm sorry.
Ask a question.
Brad, you talked about positions getting eliminated. What are you going to do to protect people's jobs? Are they going to be treated like the magazine staffers were?
We'll have more information as we move forward. Thank you very much.
And how will your positions be decided?
You seem to be disrespecting this.
We're not going to turn the town hall into a grievance session, please. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Ask a question.
Brad, you talked about positions getting eliminated. What are you going to do to protect people's jobs? Are they going to be treated like the magazine staffers were?
We'll have more information as we move forward. Thank you very much.
And how will your positions be decided?
And of course they're going to lose people. They have to go lay off people. They lost 500,000 subscribers in the past year. Do you know why? Because they don't have the front headline. And this is what we talked about when we talked about where I think journalists really did want Trump to win, because it was very easy for them to sell subscriptions, especially given the fact that the Washington Post is hidden completely behind a paywall. It was so easy. Well, Donald Trump did this today. And by the way, I also just found the thing that I like because it's something I've been watching a lot on YouTube. So we'll go ahead and put that up there too.
Hello.
No. No. Don't put volume up. Not yet. Not you either. the thing with CNN, especially with CNN Plus failing. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I think if CNN Plus had launched in 2019, we would still have CNN Plus today, although it would probably be failing right now. Because once again, all you had to do for 5 years really, was put a big story up that said, "Oh, but Trump!" And everybody who was brainwashed by the mainstream media ran to your outlet to go back and try to be out there and share it out and say, this is the definitive opinion. This is what it's supposed to be. And look how evil Trump is because they're saying us. And they fed on that. But once he came out of the spotlight, it stopped being easy for them to go back and do this. And I'm going to be completely honest. I'm glad archiving exists because it's really expensive to get a membership to all of these places that have a membership requirement. What do we look at almost every day? Insider, 5 free articles a month. Newsweek, 4 free articles a month. And then you can go back and archive them and keep them forever. Fox News. We see you have an ad blocker on, so we're not going to let you go and watch any of our content here. Please turn off your ad blocker. The New York, and when we add on to the top of that, the New York Times, a former newspaper, Reuters. Even with an ad blocker on, you are not allowed to sit and watch and read any of these documents. Any article that they put out, you're not allowed to. And now, between the economy and the fact that they can't gin up a frothing response just by putting Trump on the front page anymore, of course they have to go lay people off. Good. You get what you deserve. Let's talk about electric vehicles. Going all the way back to the beginning of what it was that we talked about at the beginning. Toyota CEO Akio Toyoda, silent majority of automakers not fully sold on electric vehicles. Yeah, we're getting some of that at work right now too because we deal in electric vehicles at some point. And I've seen the email now where, it came out and said, hey, these things are not going to have the range that they had when it's 40 below out. Obviously. I mean, even in my gas vehicle, I've noticed that when the temperature drops below about 2 below 0, that battery's working a little bit harder than it was when it was 40 degrees last week. Battery's working just a little bit harder than it was. Any sort of battery, any sort of electric storage device does not perform as well when it's cold. That's one of the big crutches that we have off here. And we know what that technology is now because we deal with it. And we knew what it was before because we deal with it now. But right from the beginning, when they started talking Tesla and changing everything over to EV, I said, what's going to happen in Wisconsin in the winter? And I'm sure there are a slew of other problems that these EVs are having right now. From Ryan Saavedra. The head of the world's largest automaker said this week that he remains skeptical of trying to move to only producing electric vehicles, and that the majority of people who work in the auto industry agree with him. Toyota Motor Chief Akio Toyoda made the remarks while speaking to reporters during a visit to Thailand. People involved in the auto industry are largely a silent majority, Toyota said. The silent majority is wondering whether EVs are really okay to have a single option, but they think it's a trend that they can't speak out loudly. Because the right answer is still unclear, we shouldn't limit ourselves to just one option. The remarks came as supply chain issues that were sparked by the coronavirus pandemic have continued to make it difficult for manufacturers to get the raw materials needed to make new cars, especially EVs. The Wall Street Journal reported that while some Toyota rivals have jumped fully on board with EVs, Setting future dates at which their companies would only produce electric vehicles, Toyota has diversified its future product offerings and is focused on making traditional gas cars, hybrids, and hydrogen-powered vehicles. Jack Hollis, Executive Vice President of Sales at Toyota Motor North America, said earlier this year that the company does not believe that the demand for electric vehicles is as high as people think it is. It's not. And Toyota is doing it right, by the way. Now, you've got companies like GM coming out there that are coming out and saying that we're only going to produce electric vehicles by a certain point in time. You've got companies like Tesla that only ever produce electric vehicles. But companies like Toyota and Ford are coming out here and playing the market. And you will very quickly tell where your manufacturing needs to go if you have the offerings out there, whether it be EV, whether it be gas, or whether it be diesel in some cases, or whether it be hydrogen. All you have to do is offer all the options out there and see who buys what and who buys how many of what. And I think it's going to be a mix still to this day. I mean, you remember back in the 90s when they tried to move diesel into passenger cars and it never took off, but then in the 2000s they tried it again and it actually took off. Mostly fueled by the TDI in Volkswagen. There's an easy way to see what the demand is. And again, it's by putting all three options out there, marketing them equally, and seeing where the people go. And it'd be an interesting experiment. There are people out there that want an electric vehicle. And good for them. Enjoy. You will face some struggles based on your electric vehicle preference, including trying to get around in the winter and your electric bill coming up. If you want a gas car, you will face some struggles like fuel prices. You're at the mercy of whatever government policy and markets will bear. And increasing electronics that make it harder and harder to work at them at home. Diesel. You're at the mercy of fuel prices, of course, as well. Plus the fact that you do struggle sometimes in winter unless you have a really, really good block heater. Hydrogen, it's an unproven fuel source. But the people will try it, and what's successful and what their friends do will largely play a shape on that. But the market will show what the people want. So put the options out there and then change your marketing strategy accordingly. All right, we are quarter two. This one I think is important. Actually, this is going to get added to the thing that I like stack. So it's not just 2 videos and we're done. Talking about unions, though. DeSantis promotes bill to stop zombie unions from deducting from teacher paychecks. From Andrew Chapados. Dude, the union is dead. It's nothing but a donor machine for Democrat policies at this point. It had its heyday, and there are chances that it may come back, but the union is dead right now, dude. If unions don't have a majority that are actually signing up to pay dues, it should be decertified, Ron DeSantis announced to supporters at a school board retreat in Orlando. DeSantis then referred to some unions as zombie organizations that are siphoning dues off teacher paychecks, as reported by the Florida Standard. DeSantis expects that a bill focused on paycheck protection will soon pass that will put a stop to automatic deductions of union dues from teachers' checks alongside an increase in pay. Teachers can expect probably the biggest increase for teachers that we've ever done in Florida in this coming legislative session, said the governor. It's not going to be frittered away by interest groups who get involved in the school system, he added. DeSantis made several arguments to support his reasoning for ending the automatic deductions, chiefly pointing towards the freedom of choice regarding whether or not someone wishes to be part of the union. You do not have to join a teachers union, but if you do, the government, we don't want you to play a role in deducting anybody's money, remarked DeSantis, mentioning that the move maximizes each individual's freedom of choice. I think that it'll be a more accurate reflection of who actually wants to be a part of this or not, he continued, as the union got very, very nervous. Florida's largest union, the Florida Educators Association, is one of the largest labor unions in the region. With over 150,000 members, it has partnered with multiple national unions, such as the National Education Association, which on its website lists an array of benefits that it provides to its members. The item on the list that's most likely to turn off DeSantis supporters is a fifth entry, which is to support the fight for social justice and racial equity. And again, just like I said with the Toyota thing, give the option and let the market bear. And you will very quickly find out whether or not your union is wanted by how many people signed up for it, and if people want to be part of it. They should have the freedom to do so. I don't think that outlawing unions is the right way to do it. But outlawing the practice that you're required to join it in order to work at a certain place, I think is the way to do that. And a very good indicator as to how many people actually want to participate in something like this. So, good on Florida. Let the market decide. You'll know very quickly who wants to be a part of this and who doesn't. All right, we're coming up on the end of the show here, but I said I wanted to spend some time on this, and we do have some time that I can spend on this now. This is a Wall Street Journal opinion piece that was put out by Brad Raffensperger, Secretary of State of Georgia. And I wanted to talk about this because the Wall Street Journal, Warnock actually pushed back on this, but I do think Raffensperger is right about this. So, from Wall Street Journal opinion, this is an opinion piece. This is not necessarily the opinion of Wall Street Journal. It is the opinion of Brad Raffensperger. But it's not the opinion of the Wall Street Journal, Turns and Pages Productions, Contemporary, or your host. But let's read the words of Bradley Raffensperger. I've spent a lot of time shooting down false claims about our elections in Georgia. Usually they come from losers, but sometimes even victorious candidates make false claims about our elections. After the 2018 and 2020 elections, Georgia had its fill of false claims from losing candidates that our elections aren't free and fair. For Trump and all his supporters, it was tens of thousands of fraudulent ballots that were supposedly cast, but somehow never turned up. Honk honk. For Abrams and hers, it was tens of thousands of voters who were suppressed, not one of whom came forward during her 3-year landmark lawsuit. Georgia statewide official, Governor Kemp, Attorney General Chris Carr, and I stood by Georgia's elections in 2018 and 2020, defeating the false claims of failed candidates last month. Georgia returned us to the Gold Dome with commanding margins, whereas statewide Democratic candidates who endorsed or supported Biden's Jim Crow 2.0 conspiracy theories came up short in dramatic fashion. Senator Raphael Warnock made it to runoff, which he won by the smallest margin of any statewide race. Mr. Warnock and the White House have decided to double down on false claims anyway. During his victory speech, Mr. Warnock stated, "Just because voters endure the rain and cold and all kinds of tricks in order to vote, doesn't mean that voter suppression does not exist. Yet you had the highest turnout in history in Georgia, both by numbers and percentage." White House Press Secretary Token Diversity Hire, who has claimed both the 2016 and 2018 both the 2016 presidential and 2018 Georgia gubernatorial elections were stolen, pointed to unspecified reports of suppression. I thought I'd heard every conspiracy theory there was after 2020, but the idea that Republicans control the weather to make it harder for Democrats to vote is a new one. Yeah, usually it's the Jews that get that accusation. I pity the voters, I pity the fool of the Northeast blue states that regularly vote in the cold, largely with less early voting than Georgia, if they have any at all. And I don't even know what Mr. Warnock means by all kinds of other tricks. Perhaps he's referring to Georgia's common sense requirements of photo ID for all forms of voting, which he has supported for overturning through federal takeover of elections. Or maybe he's referring to our citizenship check, which allies are still trying to overturn in court. Messrs. Warnock's and Biden's stolen election claims would be laughable if they weren't so dangerous to public trust in elections. Months ago, a federal judge appointed by President Obama castigated Miss Abrams' past campaign manager in open court for calling the 2020 elections Democrats won free and fair, but the 2018 elections stolen. The judge then summarized the Abrams position as follows. When you lost, it wasn't a free election, but when you won, it was a free election. Mr. Warnock, too, seems to only see fairness in Democrat victories. In August 2020, he wrote that unless the Voting Rights Act was rewritten by the way Democrats wanted, not only Georgia, but the whole country would be deprived of a safe and fair election. No updates to the act have been passed since the month before he claimed the state of Georgia has failed to protect our basic rights to vote. And that's... What's funny about that is they make the claim the other direction. Like, people like Warnock will come back out and specifically say that Donald Trump only accepts results when his people win. It's only fair when MAGA people win. To MAGA people, it's only fair when they win, which there's some merit to that claim. Trust me. He's not shooting completely blindly when he says that, but regardless, I mean, if you live in a glass house. But Warnock responded. From CBS, Senator Raphael Warnock responds to Brad Raffensperger's op-ed, calling him an election denier. From Sarah Lynch Baldwin. Raphael Warnock responded to an op-ed by Georgia Secretary of State that called him an election denier over his remarks about voter suppression. We won't do the quotes because we just read the article. Raffensperger referred in part to Warnock's victory speech after winning a runoff for a Georgia Senate seat earlier this month, in which Warnock said, just because people endured long lines wrapped around buildings some blocks long, just because they endured the rain and cold and all kinds of tricks in order to vote, doesn't mean voter suppression doesn't exist. In an exclusive interview with CBS Mornings on Monday, Warnock responded, saying, "The fact that people have had to overcome barriers doesn't mean that the barriers don't exist. We literally saw college students and seniors in lines that were hours and hours long," he said. Maybe Raffensperger's happy with that. I'm not. I think we can do better than that. Ooh, easy, Ron Helton. Warnock's election victory this month gave Democrats their 51st seat in the Senate and gave him the first full 6-year term. After having previously won a special election for the seat in 2021, he's the first black American to represent Georgia in the Senate and the first black Democrat elected to the chamber from a southern state. His win came amid what he and other Democrats viewed as voter suppression efforts from Republicans, who have pointed at the state's high voter turnout to rebut those claims. Yeah, again, it's only a free and fair election if you win. But there is no voter suppression. Voter suppression does not exist. If everybody has to play by the same rules, it's not voter suppression. All right. And a little bit of terror for you before we head out of here for the day. We won't do the political one, but we'll grab the one from the Hill. Romney on possible re-election bid. I'm convinced that if I run, I win. No! 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 Please, God, no. Please, God, no. From Carolyn Vakil. Mittens Romney, who is up for re-election in 24, said in an interview published Wednesday that I'm convinced that if I run, I win. In an interview with Politico, Romney didn't say whether he would seek a second term as senator, but projected confidence that he would win if he decided to do so. I've faced long odds. Getting the nomination in 2012 was a long shot, becoming a Republican governor in one of the most liberal states in America, Massachusetts, so I'm convinced that if I run, I win. But that's a decision I'll make, the first-term Utah senator told the news outlet. Romney, a former Mass governor and 2012 GOP presidential nominee, has made a name for himself by bucking his own party and becoming one of the Republican Party's most vocal critics of President Trump. And before that, he made a name for himself by kowtowing to whatever Democrats wanted, going to war, signing off on war, and carpetbagging from one state to the other to try to get his way. In each of the 2 Trump impeachment trials, Romney voted to convict the former president, being the only GOP senator to do so in the first trial and among one of 7 in the second. Trump was ultimately acquitted in both trials. The Utah won its primary in 2018 against Mike Kennedy by over 40 points, gliding to an easily won election in November in the red state. And while the 2022 midterms demonstrated the voters rejected many of Trump's nominees, including those who projected election denialism, Trump voters are still a critical part of the GOP base. Dude, retire. It's not clear how Romney's frosty criticism of Trump might fare among Utah voters, but the Politico noted that each members of the GOP Senate leadership indicated they would endorse another senatorial bid should Romney run again. I wouldn't. I would not. I'm quite displeased by this person. Alright, let's do a couple things that I like and a thing that I hate, and head out of here for the night. And remember, by the way, if you are just lurking right now, I do read the live chat after the show, so I will see what your comments are and all this stuff, which it looks like I've got a lot of stuff to read from Ron Helton, but I also do pay attention and write down the names of everybody who chats in the live chat, and I give you a big special thank you tomorrow. And we will also be reading some of your live chats tomorrow, so if it's extra spicy, it might get on the air. Do keep in mind, we are trying to keep it family friendly, so we have a nice evening news style show. Do keep that in mind as you're making your comments. But we do go, especially if it's as slow as we've been in this new time slot, we go through everything. If it's a little bit busier, I do have to pick and choose sometimes, but if it's slow like this, then yeah, we get to everything. All right, from Fox News, thing that I like number 1. Texas federal judge rules against HHS program allowing teens confidential birth control. From Sarah Rumpf. A federal court ruling on Tuesday could make it nearly impossible for Texas teens to access birth control without parental permission. District Judge Matthew Kaczmarek ruled that Title 10, the federal program that provides free confidential contraception to anyone regardless of age, income, or immigration status, violates parental rights and violates state and federal laws. The ruling from Kaczmarek likely means that teenagers who receive care through the Title 10 family planning program will no longer be allowed to do so confidentially. This ruling threatens the health and lives of young people who may be stripped of all their ability to access health care they need to build healthy lives. Alexis McGill Johnson, president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Federation of America, because of course she is, said in a statement, as she stands to lose thousands of dollars a year from the state of Texas. Kaczmarek did not grant an injunction which would have immediately prohibited the Title 10 clinics from providing contraceptions to minors without parental consent. Kaczmarek was appointed by former President Trump in 2019 and is a former religious liberty advocate. Previously has worked on litigation to overturn contraceptive protection. Now, with this being said, the reason that I like this, I actually am, I do stand apart from many of my more tradcon friends because I am in favor of contraception. Because I know the urge is there and not everyone is as strong as my more religious friends, and people are going to want to do it. And I think that it should be safely done to a point where they shouldn't do it and make children and then go kill those children. I'm a big fan of contraception. Where I draw the line is the same thing where I draw the line for the insane transgender agenda, where I draw the line for the surgeries, the diddling, and everything else. Leave the kids out of it. Now, as far as this goes, there are a lot of parents, and I knew them back in the 90s, who had their kids on the pill at age 14. Who had their little young girls on the pill at age 14. I disagree with that to an extent. Sometimes, though it is menstrual control, there are aspects of that as well. But that is a decision for the parents. And the reason that I say it's a decision that the parents need to be involved in is by state and most federal laws, you, Mr. Parent, Mr. Guardian, unless there is a legal emancipation out there, are responsible for the health, safety, and well-being of said child under your care until the point that that child becomes and attains the age of 18 years. And it's really hard to stay with your responsibilities that the state, local, and federal governments have put down on you to care for either your offspring or the offspring that you have legally taken the care of if you don't know what's going on. It's hard enough to know what's going on anyway. It's damn hard to know what's going on once they get up to that nice 14, 15, 16 year age. So yes, the parents should be involved in this decision, because if something does go majorly wrong, there's a complication, a bleed out, something else like that. The parents are sitting there facing severe penalties for negligence. End of story. If they don't know what's going on and something bad happens, the state of Texas, the state of Wisconsin, the state of Rhode Island, the state of Wyoming, the state of Colorado, they go after the parents and they make the parents pay out the nose for negligence and sometimes put them in a jail cell. So yes, the parents should be involved. Absolutely. I think this was a win for what the proper societal role is. Thing that I like, number 2. So I saw this in the recommendeds while I was looking at the thing that I hate, and realized that I've been watching a lot of this lately. So the channel's called Pente Patrol Star Wars, and they've narrated all of the videos here. It is if you're very into Star Wars, this is a lot of fun, especially on the philosophical side, because there's a lot of conversation about what if Anakin got a Padawan after Ahsoka left. Star Wars what ifs. This one I haven't seen yet, so I'm actually marking this for watch later. What if Ahsoka raised Luke and Leia? Which I have seen that raised on a different channel, and I didn't like how it turned out, so I'm going to be seeing this one here. Or what if Anakin had a sister? Various different things in the universe and seeing how it would have changed. I've seen what had happened if Anakin had turned Obi-Wan to the dark side, or at least got him to walk away from the Order. That was a really good one, by the way. If you want to start with one, that would be a really good one to start with, because they go into extensive detail as to how it would have still come out and how Palpatine would have still tried to rise to the position of power that he was in. How he would have survived, how he would have attempted to go. So, if you guys haven't checked it out, Pente Patrol Star Wars is the channel over on YouTube, so go check that out. And now we will do a thing that I hate. Those of you who follow me on Twitter and are active on Twitter already know what's coming, because I tweeted about it earlier on today. I got a little break in the action today at work and was looking at Instagram, and this trailer popped up. And by the way, Netflix has not ruined everything that I liked when I was younger yet. They've got to take one more wooden stake and drive it into something that I liked when I was younger. I can't believe I'm about to say this. Let's sit down and watch the trailer for that 90s show A Netflix original, That 90s Show. And sit ourselves in with dread at what's to come. Let's have a look.
Well, I have to make a shopping list. The kids are gonna want snacks.
Don't feed them, kitty. That's how it started the first time.
I am going to get Fritos, Tostitos, Doritos, all the Eatos. I am back, baby.
Son of a bitch.
Hanging out down the street.
I got it.
Hey, Grandma. Hey, Grandpa.
Leia.
Tell me about Chicago. What are you into?
I'm a pretty big deal in debate club. That's not up for debate. Yeah, I'm not popular.
Hey, new girl.
Leia, you should buy the tab.
Pause. This isn't gonna work. I'm pretty sure Osh Gosh Begosh here is gonna get carded.
Oh, look, Nick. Shooting star. Make a wish.
That's a firework, babe.
Wish I could stay for the summer.
Can stay.
Okay, kids, the basement is all yours.
Your grandma just hooked us up.
What is it?
Leia, do you want to hear about the Donkey Kong conspiracy?
He's a gorilla.
Interesting. It's kind of like how Sheryl Crow isn't actually a crow.
Totally. If you're worried about fitting in with everyone else, you found the people who don't fit in. I still can't believe Jay didn't kiss you.
Oh my God!
My guy's got a bunch of salons. You may have seen his commercials.
Welcome back to KTZed. It's always an honor to have your hair in my chair.
Why did you open our house to chaos again? All the dumbasses were gone.
I love having the house full again. It fills me with joy.
Eric's having a hard time with Leia.
But all I know is that I'm going to love her and stand behind her no matter what.
Great idea.
I muted myself too before I hit the mute button, before I hit the pause button. How does Topher Grace not age? Topher Grace looks exactly like he did in his last scene in the 70s show. Before he went off to Africa or whatever the hell he did. How does he not age?
That is a great idea. Because when you stand behind your kids, it's easier
To put your foot in their ass. Yeah, we got it, Dan. Thanks.
I will admit, from the trailer, this actually looks like this would be good. And it doesn't look like they're going to depend, especially with what they focused on in this, that they're going to ultimately depend on the nostalgia. Like a lot of Fuller House did. A lot of Fuller House did depend on the nostalgia behind that. But I have seen Netflix's uncanny ability to ruin things that they get their hands on. I don't think there's going to be a lot of trans in this, by the way. That's one thing. I know a lot of people were talking about this in the comments, that everybody's going to be trans in the basement. Because they did try to keep the original to the 70s standard. And trans wasn't really that big of a thing yet in the 90s. It was something that was joked about in the Weekly World News. It wasn't huge into there. But with that being said, I do usually have a complaint when I see stuff like this pop up, and I beg Hollywood and Netflix studios and everything else to make something new. I can't use that in this one, because let's be realistic about this. That 70s show was essentially a remake of Happy Days. Also, the other big problem that I have with this is I do think that this came just a little bit too late to be the 90s show. Because the 70s show came out in the 90s, where the 70s were 20 years before the 90s. And Happy Days, I guess the Happy Days, though, did come out in the 80s, wasn't it? Where they were talking about the 50s, so maybe that was 30 years back. But I do think that this was just a little bit late to be a 90s look back. And And again, my big question is how does Topher Grace not age? Everybody else in the cast aged. How does Topher Grace look exactly like he did at the last scene of that 70s show? When is this coming out now? Oh, no, they're not going to show here.
Dear.
A shopping list. The kids are gonna. Well, I have to make a shopping list.
I guess they don't say when it's going to release. Let's see if we can find that 90s show release. So in just a few weeks, actually. January 19th is going to be the release. I hope this, for the sake of the actress, I do hope this does better than that 80s show. Because remember, that one bombed almost immediately. Alright, we're done. Let's get out of here for the day. Oops, that's not my solo. There we go. Now we got the solo up here. Where's the outro music? Alright, so thanks everybody who came by and hung out and chatted in the live chat. We did get quite busy at the end. I was kind of impressed by that. I do hope to see you all back here again tomorrow as we actually dive through some of the live chat as well. And again, as soon as we're off air here, I'll go back through the records and write the names down of everybody who chatted throughout the week. And make sure that you guys all get a special thank you. Otherwise, come back and join me here 6 p.m. Central Time tomorrow for more news, more headlines, more contemporary, and your live chat as well. Definitely looking forward to that. So, with that, we will see you here then. Go check out some great stuff. If you're on the Twitch side, by the way, stick around here. We're going to go do some rating over here, as we always do. And lastly, if I don't see you here tomorrow, I do want to take some time to wish you all a Merry Christmas. It's very cold here in Wisconsin right now. And I don't know if I'm going to be able, even if I'm closer, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see family or not. So we'll be checking the weather furiously tomorrow as we go. But if you can see family, go see family over the weekend. I strongly encourage it because we were all separated from them for the coof, even though most of you didn't abide by that. But definitely come back here and join me tomorrow for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. We will see you then. And until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.